what's happened is the Yemeni economy has grown such that the remittances now, which used to be a key part of the economy, now are rather, they're not insignificant, they're important, but their contribution is much smaller, though the absolute dollars have remained the same, more or less. So then in the 90s, Yemen starts to develop its oil. Yemen started to export oil in the mid-'80s. And then if you look at the figures, I got a graph there, the production figures. It takes off right after the Civil War in 1995, goes way up, and it peaks about 2001, 2002 at about 450,000 barrels per day. By contrast, Saudi Arabia can pump 12 million barrels per day. Okay, this is not a major oil economy, but it was very important for the Yemeni economy. And oil came to represent about a third of GDP, and most significantly about 80% of 75-80% of state revenues, and that's very important. And Yemen got lucky. Sometimes it does get lucky. As production began to fall, there was a rise in oil prices. So what you saw in the 2000s, though production's falling, the income is going up. And I think the peak income was 2007. The U.S. financial collapse and its impact on the global economy. Oil prices collapsed. They went from $140 per barrel to 30, and then creeped back up again. And so in 2009, you saw a severe downturn in oil revenues, but it's gone back up again. Right now, it's about what it was in 2004. So you see this big up, a collapse, and everybody freaks out. They realize the significance of oil dependency on the Yemeni economy. The state budget took a big hit in 2009, but then it's back up again. It's not as high as it will be. Yemen, the oil is running out. There's no doubt about it. And that's the big transition, what to do with the oil, what to do with the Yemeni economy sans oil, without any oil. And here, I think it's very important to recognize that natural resources are not the source of wealth. People tend to say, "Oh my God, Yemen's running out of oil. What's going to replace it?" And they scramble around. They say, "Oh, well, maybe mines." And the mining sector is big in Yemen. There's a lot of room for expansion in the mining sector. A lot of interest in the Yemeni mining sector. And they say, "Oh my God, well, tourism. Oh, this, that, the other. Where's the other?" Thing that's going to replace what oil has given to the Yemeni economy? Well, first, natural resources are often a curse. Just to give you two examples, sub-Saharan Africa is extremely resource rich, but they're some of the worst economies in the world. And Japan is extremely resource poor. They don't have any resources, right? But they're one of the richest economies in the world. It's human labor. It's productivity, human productivity that creates wealth. It's labor that produces wealth. And I think it's very important to recognize that in the Yemeni economy, because there is a lot of labor. And Yemeni labor is very productive. It can be very productive. And that's going to be the source of a future Yemeni economy. The future Yemeni economy is not going to be as dependent upon a single stream of revenue as it has in the past two periods. It's not going to be the remittance period drove the first phase in the economy. The oil drove the second phase. What Yemen is going to be in the future is going to be a much more diverse economy. There's not going to be a single thing. It's not LNG. It's not going to be the oil. Those are both going to continue to contribute to the economy, but it's going to be a much more diverse economy. It has to be. Now, the catch in all this is that in a more diverse economy, the state has to play a much more capable role in managing the economy for a number of reasons. And this gives us fear. This gives us reason to pause, at least up until now. I think there's some hopeful developments going on in Yemen right now. But up until now, and particularly during the oil period, scholars like April Ali and Abdul Ghani Rayani, they pointed out sort of the patronage network that has undermined institutions in Yemen, and I think it's quite true. That really is the legacy of Ali al-Saleh, the lack of institutional development in Yemen. And that lack of capacity in the state's institutions and in institutions of society is what's needed. That, to me, is the key for the next period of the Yemeni economy, because what you're going to have to do is get Yemeni labor involved. In the remittance period, Yemeni labor was involved, but it was organized in Saudi Arabia. The relations of production were in Saudi Arabia. So Yemeni labor was extremely productive. It earned a lot. It created a lot of wealth, but in Saudi Arabia under Saudi management. In the oil period, Yemeni labor, they weren't doing much. If you look at the Yemeni economy, oil plays a big role, construction plays a big role, commerce plays a big role. You can see I have some charts on the different roles of different sectors, but the productive sectors, they're not there. They're not emphasized in Yemen, and the reason is that nobody felt secure in Yemen. You talk to a Yemeni business person, the first thing they're going to do with their money is they're going to get it outside the country. People don't want to, keep their money inside of Yemen. And one of the I'll tell you the key. If there's one figure you want to watch for a turnaround in Yemen, it's Yemeni private capital transfers. They go out, they're negative, but as soon as they start going positive, you know that you've got something good happening in Yemen. And what's it going to take? It's going to take a legitimate government. We're working on that. It's going to take the state doing the basic things that it needs to do, which are security, infrastructure, keep the lights on, keep roads going, education, get education going. Those are sort of the basic things that the state needs to do. It's got to pay for itself. And here again, there's a problem. In the remittance period, the state got most of its money either from the ports, either from tariffs, or from development assistance from overseas. And in the oil period, of course, that's where the state got its money. All the revenue for the economy was coming through the state, so they paid for themselves through the oil. Now it's gone. So how's the state going to play this role? How's it going to manage this transition? It has to tax. It has to get the capacity to tax. If you look at the relationship of tariffs, a key relationship is the relationship between tariffs and taxes in the revenue of the state. And if you look at Yemen right now, tariffs are much larger. They're still much larger than taxation. Taxation is hard to do. Think of you're about to fill out your income tax, right? It's a complicated thing. And for the state to organize it and for it to be effective, it requires a legitimate government. It requires a lot of capacity on part of the state, surveillance, monitoring. It requires a lot of capacity out of people to do that sort of thing. It's not an easy task to do, and it's a measure of the sophistication of the state. That's the next task. They've been working on it. There's been a project that's been going on with the business sector and whatnot, and there's some hopeful developments. And one of the key things about it is that in order to tax, people demand representation, right? There is a relationship with society that is important. An oil state, a rentier state, and this is what we've seen in Yemen. This is how oil is a curse. The oil state, they have their own revenues. They don't depend on any political pacts with the private sector or with society. But if you start taxing, which they're going to have to do, people say, well, what are we getting for our taxes? They're going to demand some accountability there. And so the politics of taxation, I think, are very important too, because it brings the state into contact with society. They have to begin to organize society, which Yemen's, you guys, anybody who's been there, the Yemeni society organizes itself. The state doesn't organize anything over there. That's got to change. If we're going to have an economy that's going to be more diversified, and that's going to be based upon raising labor productivity inside of Yemen, the state is going to have to play a much more capable and much more active role. Now, let's say the state just does what we consider the minimum of state responsibility, which is sort of infrastructure and security, providing courts and enforcing contracts and property rights, and it's a steep bill already in Yemen. But let's say it just does that. I still think that's insufficient. That if you really want to have development in Yemen and in any economy, the state has to play kind of a management role, not a this. I'm not talking about socialism. I'm not a socialist, okay? No socialists here. But the state has to play a coordinating role in the economy.